So I just created a small presentation for us, something very simple. Hopefully it gives you some insight. So yeah, I teach at the Hokkaido International School. It has two campuses, but I'm at the Sapporo campus. The other one is in Niseko. And I've been there for about 2.5 years now. Prior to that, I've traveled the globe. A little bit about my background. So I've been in education for over 20 years, and 12 of those years have been mostly in Japan. And on the screen, you can see some pictures. My family, my son Noah and my husband Daisuke, and that's a picture of us in Canada, actually, where I am right now on holidays. It's a place we like to come back to, and I'm originally from a French background, but I've been working in English most of my life. And my educational philosophy kind of connects to the second picture on this slide. I'm very big advocate of outdoor education, which has been becoming more and more important to me. But really, my educational philosophy is very holistic, meaning that I really think about the whole child and not just certain parts of the child or only their cognitive development, but their whole development. And so my practice over the years has been influenced a lot by the baccalaureate, the International Baccalaureate, the PYP program in particular, which was part of my practice for several years when I started. Came into that, the Reggio Emilia approach, which that's been a big part of my practice also for many years now. As a guideline, I often refer back to the American NAEYC Association and their guidelines around developmentally appropriate practice. So I tend to refer to that a lot whenever I have questions or I'm not sure which way I should go. And outdoor education, and more recently the Te Whareki, because we've been redesigning our curriculum, and we really liked the way it merged with our Reggio-inspired program and how holistic it was. And just there were lots of things about the Te Whareki that really appealed to us as a program. So we are piloting that now. Our early years program in Hokkaido it's very small. It's a small school. It has about 200 children from 3-year-olds to 18-year-olds. And so it's very intimate and the community is nice. We have 3, 4, and 5-year-olds together in the early years program, which I teach. It's a Reggio-inspired program. As I said, we are piloting and creating right now a new curriculum that's based on, we've taken the principles and the learning outcomes of the Te Whareki and are molding that to our context. And we are increasingly focusing on outdoor education. And one of things that have brought me to this webinar is the fact that we use StoryPark for e-portfolios. And my journey with StoryPark started probably around, I believe, 2015. So it's been a while, and I keep referring back to it and loving it and recommending it. But it is at the moment what I feel works best when a center is thinking about e-portfolios. Just a bit of background around that picture that you see on this slide. It's a project that we did with parents last year around the image of the child. So we worked with parents in our classroom and asked them what they thought their image of the child was, what they thought was important about children. And we created a board with different words and different ideas around childhood. And that was a really nice piece of family engagement that we created together last year. So basically around connecting with families, I think one of the best thing about, you know, Story Park for me is the fact that it's family owned. So it's owned by the family, not by the teacher. So when we create an account, the parents are the owners. They're the ones who will invite their families. They're the ones who will invite friends to join this portfolio. And so the teacher does control somewhat the content, but the families do as well. And the families get to keep the e-portfolio for as long as they can. And it's happened to me recently where I've had a child who already had a Story Park e-portfolio in their previous center and moved to our school and was able to connect me to that portfolio. So I was able to see their learning from their previous center. And that was it was a first for me, but it was a really great experience. I find that it's very multifaceted. So whenever I look at an e-portfolio, I always want it to not only work for the families, but also work for me as a teacher. So what does it have within it that is going to save me time, or is going to help me as a teacher, or is going to help my own assessment? And so I find that it does that really well in terms that it not only helps you connect, you know, from the beginning of the year and throughout the school year, it kind of evolves into, first, it helps me connect with families and build that trust. Then it helps me educate parents about our program and how we do things in the classroom, especially things around play-based learning that might not always be very, you know, well known with parents. And then it also helps me to make the learning of the children visible but through pictures and videos and stories, and what we call in Reggio jargon documentation. And also it helps me reporting and assessment. So it helps me keep track of things and it helps me report. And whenever I end up at the end of the school year having to do a final report, I can go back into the portfolio and find the evidence that I need. And the content, I feel, becomes kind of gradually co-constructed. So that's another part. Well, at the beginning, I'm kind of holding the hands of the families, going through, you know, how does it work? What can you do with it? And then little by little, you know, we want the children and families to add content to it and become more accustomed and more involved in it. Depending on the year, there are families that feel very comfortable connecting through the portfolios, others a little bit more shy. It really depends. It really depends on, you know, individual levels of comfort with technology, with that kind of documentation, with that kind of communication. But at best of times, I've had grandparents and friends comment and send questions and have lots of interactions over Story Park. And when families struggle with it, then I really have to kind of like encourage them to look at it, remind them that things are there. And yeah, there's a lot more kind of education and handholding that needs to happen. But eventually, I would say that by the end of the year, we do get to a place where, you know, we can say to children, hey, why don't we put this on your Story Park? Or, hey, do you want to share this with your family? Let's put that on your Story Park. So that little by little, the children get more and more ownership of an agency over what goes into their portfolio. And on the picture on this slide, you'll see like one of the things that I really love to do with families is connecting them right from the first day. So often families are a little bit nervous on the first day when their child starts. And so this is an example of a post. It was longer than this. This is just the first page. And I've I've blanked faces, sorry, and names and things, you know, obviously for privacy. But it's a child's first day in our center, and we're just giving the parents a glimpse at what their day was like on the first day. And I find that tends to hook them in right away because they want to see how their child's first day was. And it's so much better for me at the end of the day, instead of having a long conversation at the door about how your child's first day went, I can just say, you know what, I've just posted a bunch of things on Story Park. Please go there and you'll see what their day was like today. He or she had a great day. Please go ahead and take a look at it. So that's a nice way to hook them in. And then, I move from individual posts to group posts as time goes by. So at the beginning, I find families will respond more to individual posts, so things that are very much only about their child. I find it also helps to kind of deconstruct this kind of competition sometimes that parents can have, because if I'm posting only about their child, they're only seeing what their child is doing, and they don't have the opportunity to kind of go, oh well, my child is doing this and their child is doing that. And so I find that at the beginning, it's a kind of nice way to say, hey, we're focusing on your child, and this is what your child can do. And little by little, as depending on the community of parents, we move from individual posts to kind of group posts where, we kind of go and write posts that are about the whole group and the inquiry of the whole classroom, because that's also super important. As parents need to also understand that even though their child is learning, they're also learning from others, and others are learning from them. So there's this socio-constructivist kind of, ethos that I like to develop with families, where I really emphasize the fact that even though your child didn't do this particular activity, they still learned from that activity because they were watching others do it, because we talked about it as a group, because it was part of the group learning. So little by little, we move along those lines. So that's pretty much all I had today.
I was wondering, do your families sometimes share any family moments or something similar on Story Park that you can see as an educator?
Yes, yeah, and it really it depends. I think there is sometimes some parent education to be done around that. It's not always natural for parents to do that, but others are quite happy to share moments from home. And I think during online learning, we found that that was really useful and a great way to share that during those moments, because then we could keep track, and we encourage parents to add things during that time to their Story Park. It's really great when that home and school connection can happen, where grandparents or parents will share something that happened on the weekend, or share something that happened over a holiday, or because sometimes we have families that have grandparents or sibling or extended family abroad, that that extended family can keep track or can follow the child's learning through Story Park. And so I've had many beautiful kind of connections with that too. Yeah.
When you receive these kinds of family posts, what is usually your next course of action? Like, what do you do with, do you share that back in a classroom environment, or do you ask the child, or do you contact the families? Like, what do you usually do after that?
I usually would take that comment, usually connected to a story or a post that I've made, and there's been a reply or there's been something shared. And I would usually approach a child one-on-one and say, hey, something was on your story part this weekend. Do you want to tell me more about it? Or do you want, and then, or maybe they have a response to it. So I've had kind of conversations going back and forth where, a grandparent, for example, would share something and they're in another country and say, hey, your grandparent commented on this. Do you want to see? And usually it's something that's private most of the time. It's not always something that a child may want to share with everyone. So I try to do it one-on-one and then offer them the opportunity to reply either with a picture, a video, a comment. So that's happened a few times, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really nice that you can kind of gain more perspectives, I guess, as you dig into this one story or learning moment. Like you get some insight from the parents, you then take that and ask the child what they thought about it, maybe bring in grandparents if that's possible. And it just kind of builds up this picture around that one story. I love that.
And it connects to their learning too, because I've had people suggest things to the children through their comment, and then that would spark some interest or would spark curiosity, and then they would be off in a new direction with their ideas. So that also has happened. It's rarer. It's not as common, but it does happen, and that's the potential, right?
Right. Yeah, just to transition to something else and just keeps building, I guess, not just in terms of perspective, but their interest and curiosity. That's really nice to hear. I have one more question. What do you usually do to establish a relationship with parents when they first come into your school as a new family? Is there anything special that you take care of? Anything that you try to tell them?
Yeah, there's always what we call an intake meeting, which, often lasts a while. There's so many little logistical things to help parents, kind of have a smooth first day of school. So we want to have all the logistical, all the little nuts and bolts kind of ironed out before the first day of school, so that when they come in, all they have to do that morning is drop off their child. Their child already knows the teacher, already knows where they're going to put their backpacks, already knows where they're going to put their shoes. And the parent can kind of just relax and not have the extra anxiety of finding out, well, what time do I pick up my child? And is he going to have lunch? And all that stuff is already kind of sorted out. And part of that intake is also teaching them about Story Park and teaching them about okay, these are the ways that we communicate. We do this every week. We send these and we have, you will get Story Park, and you can put this on your phone or your app. You can get an app for your iPad or your computer, and this is how you access it, and this is what it looks like. And so most of the time when I tell the parents about that we communicate in this way, and then they'll be getting pictures and videos and stories about their child, the first reaction is often, wow, you do this for every child? And I'm like, yes, I do this for every child. And it is a lot of work. And I think that one of the main thing as a teacher is, like I said, an e-portfolio has to work for you as much as it has to work for the families. So you have to kind of gauge in terms of your center, the amount of work you have already on your plate, the amount of children that you have, what is going to be sustainable for you. Because I think the one thing you want to have is is you want the communication to be, you want it to be regular. You want it to be dependable. You want the parents to be able to trust that you're going to have, regular connections with the family about what's happening in the classroom. And if that communication is kind of not regular, or the parents don't know when they'll get the next story or the next post, I feel like that's when you might lose parents. But if you can say, for example, no, I'm going to be posting for your child every third week. And usually what I do is I have a rotation. So this week I'm going to post for ABC. Next week I'm going to post for DF. I kind of go in alphabetical order. That's just the way I do it. But I think having predictability in the communication is key, because if not, then it's kind of sporadic, and parents can lose interest, or they don't really know when it's going to come. And so sometimes they might ask for more. But if you kind of set the tone at the beginning of the year where you're like, okay, I'm going to be posting this often, I think that helps to build that trust, and it helps to make sure also that you hold yourself accountable, because sometimes it can be a little bit tricky to say, oh, okay, I have to write this post, or I have to write a story, or I have to do this. So there needs to be some predictability. I think that's important.
So you kind of established like a routine, like a regular routine with the parents in the beginning. And this is not just so that you're not putting like too much work on yourself as a teacher, but also to make sure that you're conveying to the parents that they will receive regular posts. And that's really important to keep that kind of trust between home and school. Okay, that's really fascinating. So does this mean that you already have Story Park installed as you welcome them into the first day of school?
Yeah. So usually what I'll do is I may not have their child's portfolio ready, because I will be sending them an invitation. But I do show them work that I've done in the past and what it looks like and what to expect.
最初の方のスライドで、なんか、いろんな、あなたのエデュケーションフィロソフィー、PIP、インターナショナルカロレア、レッジョエミアプローチ、あとは、他にもいろいろあったと思うんですけど、そういったことと、ファーリキの共通するところって何だと思うか。で、それがなんでストーリーパークとつながっているのかっていうのを何か思うとかあったら聞きたいです。
There's a lot of overlap. I think one of the main thing that I was mostly drawn to with the Te Whariki was the well-being aspect of it and the belonging. So well-being is becoming, one of the main aspects that we need to focus on for the next generation. And so not having that part of a curriculum, I think, doesn't help children. So that's my personal opinion. But I think you'll find the same kind of lines the same lines in the IBPYP for sure. They also would put the child at the center of the curriculum and make sure that the development is holistic. And, I know that part of their personal and physical education is well-being. Reggio is an approach. It's not a curriculum. And so in that sense, it's more around the ideas of, being a teacher, researcher, and going with, an image of the child that is capable and resilient And within that image of the child, I would say within my image of the child is a child that is healthy in all ways, and mentally, emotionally, physically. And so I don't see that as, even though the Reggio Emilia approach may not, advertise, well-being as one of its main, I think it's kind of embedded in it, because the whole point of Reggio is speaking through multiple languages and helping children feel seen in whatever way they can be. And whether, those languages are to help the child's well-being and being a capable and, able child. So I think all those kind of connect. It's just that the Te Whariki has, in a beautiful way, taken perspectives, different perspectives, like the Maori perspective, and woven it into its curriculum. And the fact that it's a bicultural curriculum, it already has as an ethos the fact that two cultures meet. And I don't know any other curriculum that's written that way. And being in an international school where cultures meet, I think, there will always be questions of belonging. There will always be questions of, well-being. There will always be questions that, children need to explore and contribute, and communicate. So the big lines of the Te Whariki just make sense at this time where we're at, and in an educational system where changes are needed and children need to be met where they are at and not told where they need to be, I think, more and more. So I think I just found that curriculum to connect very well with Reggio as a nice complement to it. So Reggio brings in the idea of being a teacher researcher and documenting and assessing children by listening, deep listening. And then through that, then, looking as your radar. So I look at the Te Whariki as my radar and Reggio as my approach, but my radar is on those things like well-being and belonging and communication exploring. That's my radar. But the way I go about it is by listening, documenting, looking at the child, making sure that, I'm really digging deep to make sure that I understand what's going on with the children, and documenting that. And I think that's where Story Park comes in, is that it gives me the tool to document and to connect with the community. And we know that in Reggio as well, it's a very democratic type of approach. So we want the children's voices out there, talking and sharing and, communicating what they are doing in the classroom and being citizens of the now, not citizens of the future. They are citizens of the now. They have a voice right now, and they have agency right now, even though they're only 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. And I think that the Te Whariki really empowers children. And so that, I think there's a nice mix there for both things to come together.
It's really like you've seen that there are like discourse on globalization of like the children and stuff, but you're seeing that there's an element of like biculturalism in Te Whariki that is special. Like it's not just about global, but it's about how I then belong in that circumstance, that environment, like what my well-being is, what my identity is. And that's something that is so important.
I think there are curriculums, like I'm thinking about the British Columbia curriculum in Canada, where they are trying to bring the Indigenous perspective into their curriculum. And so there is some curriculums that are starting to really connect, but being in an international school, I think it's actually really key for us to keep our eye on that and not let go of the fact that we are a multicultural community. And so, yeah.
Thank you for the presentation, Anne 先生。インターナショナルスクールのちょっとシステムが分かんないんですけども、インターナショナルスクールの場合は、どんなカリキュラムとか入れてもいいんですか？その保育所、保育指針に従わなくても、ファーリキだったり、レッジョだったり、なんかそういうのをミックスしていいのか、その場合は、なんか家族にやっぱり、独自の教育方針ってやっぱり示していかないと見えづらいと思うんですけど、そういうのってラーニングストーリー使っていきますよ、ストーリーパーク使っていきますよとか、そういう教育方針をいつ説明していくのかっていうのと。
So the international school system has a system of accreditation. So sometimes they are recognized by the Japanese government if they're in Japan or their local governments, but mostly they have an accreditation that might be from the US, or if they're a British school, it might be from England, or if they're an Australian school from Australia. So it depends on the international school. So for example, in the case of Hokkaido, we are accredited by the state of Washington, actually. And so we go through a self-evaluation process. We have to submit reports. We have to make sure that our curriculums are research-based. So we're not allowed to just, take any curriculum. We do have to prove that they are research-based and that they're vertically aligned with the rest of the school. So in the case of Hokkaido, they have the International Primary Curriculum, the IPC, that they follow, and the IMYC, which is the International Middle School curriculum that they follow, which is similar to IB, but different. And they are also part of the Japan Council of International Schools. So there's kind of two accreditation bodies that kind of make sure that, we kind of, make sure that our programs are up to standards, that they respond to a certain amount of criteria and things like that. That said, we do have a little bit more flexibility, let's say, than a public school where it's mandated by the government. Since it's a private school, we do have the flexibility of saying, well, this curriculum doesn't really respond to our vision and mission anymore. Therefore, we will change it to this curriculum. Of course, those have processes within the school. For example, there is a curriculum committee that needs to approve things. Needs to go through different stakeholders like the parents, the board, the different curriculums, but there's some checks and balances along the way to make sure that those are not just whatever.
アン先生がさっき効果のところで、educating parents っていうのをお話しいただいたと思うんですけども、なんか親の成長って結構見えづらいと思うんですけども、どんな場面でストーリーパーク使うことによって、なんか親教育ができているなとか、親の成長が感じられるなっていうのを感じて、保育とか教育に活かせてるのか、その辺をお聞きしたいなと思うんですけど、お願いします。
That's a big question, because I think parent education really depends on the parents that you have. You know, some groups of parents are very aligned with what we do and understand it from their own personal, you know, experiences. And, you know, if you have a family that comes from New Zealand, then you go to a school like ours and you say, oh, we're piloting something on, you know, based on the Te Wāriki, they'll be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And there, you know, but if we have a family that this is very new to them, then they require a different kind of education, and that is possible sometimes. I've had years where I've done actual webinars where I've had, you know, Zoom sessions with parents about questions that they were really interested in, anything from, you know, language acquisition to behavior at home to, you know, different things like that. But it really depends on the parents, and it really depends on their openness, also their time. If they're, you know, some parents are very involved in school, some parents are not. So I want to say, like, there's not a one size fits all kind of answer, you know. I think what I do each year is I kind of walk into a classroom and say, okay, get to know my parents through the intake interviews that I have at the beginning of the year. I kind of have a few weeks where I gauge their engagement and say, oh, are they responding to this? Are they looking at the stories that I post? Are they not? Are they mentioning it? I might mention it in a conversation where, you know, oh, have you checked this week? You know, those kind of, I kind of assess. So I do a kind of prior assessment of where my parents are at. And then from there, I can develop parent education. So this year was, for some reason, very, like, a lot less engagement this year than I've had in prior years. So this year I've decided, I said, okay, next school year, I'm going to start, and I'm going to make sure that I have a parent night face-to-face, because we can now, and make sure that I get that face-to-face interaction with them, present them some things, kind of gauge where they're at. And I'll probably say right away something along the lines of, by the way, I would love to support you at home as well. There are certain things that you find difficult at home or outside of school, or something about school you want to understand more, that I can support you with, and kind of ask them to give me feedback and kind of be there for the parents, because especially for early years, by helping the parent, you help the child. So if you don't have that good connection at home, it really is difficult after that to help the child, support the child at school with anything that they may require. Or you learn so much from parents when you have a good relationship with them. So I would say that the story part is what helps me build trust with them, because they see that when I take pictures of their child, when I report stories, when I talk about what they're doing at school, they feel like I see their child. I see him or her. This is what I understand of your child. So by building that trust, then it gets a little bit easier to go to the next step and say, by the way, are you interested in hearing about anything? Are there any resources I can give you? And then I can move into, you know, maybe having a parent night on a particular topic, or having a Zoom session on a particular topic. And, you know, sometimes on Zoom sessions, I'll get 1 or 2 parents, and that's okay, because we record them and we post them, and then the parents can watch them afterwards, you know. So the story park is also a great piece of a great speaking to piece kind of thing. It's something that you can speak to when you meet with parents as well. So when I meet with them one-on-one for parent-teacher conferences as well, I might pull out a picture or a video or something and say, look, this is where they were at the beginning of the year. This is what they're doing now. Show them progress. Maybe talk about things that, we've been working on and things like that. So I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. But parent engagement can be tricky.
I think so.
I find a lot of parents here want to have pictures. They want pictures, a lot of pictures. And and basically it's kind of my hook, it's like, okay, I'll send you lots of pictures, but I also want you to come and talk to me, and sometimes that ice is hard to break, it's not always easy. And a lot of the time, e-portfolios are not enough to break the ice. You need the face-to-face contact too. Yeah.
Thank you so much again, Anne, for sharing your experiences, what you feel about family engagement, and everything you know about Story Park and Te Whāriki. They've been really, really helpful for us and so much to learn. So thank you so much for sharing. Thank you, Junko-san, also for coming to join us today.
I would love to hear from, Sato-san at some point too. I'm sure she has so much to share. So thank you for being part of this.
Thank you.